Hi everyone, thanks Thomas, and thank you Catherine for your talk. That was really interesting. And thanks to everyone for joining us today as well. It's nice to have you here. My name is Katie. I'm an architect and member of the Architecture and Design Cooperative Transition by Design. So my talk is titled Pioneering the Cooperative Practice Model, and today I'm going to be talking to you about what it means to be a workers' cooperative and an architect practice. When I first started at Transition by Design 3 years ago, I had very little understanding of the ins and outs of what this would mean for me practicing architecture. So today I'm hoping to dive a little bit deeper than just what a co-op is and take you behind the scenes to introduce you to some of the nuts and bolts behind how our business model, governance structure and our architecture work alongside each other. So here's the team. I'll start off with a bit of an overview. TBD first set up in 2011 as a limited company, but we restructured 5 years ago to become a community interest company, limited by guarantee, and we're a not-for-profit organisation. In practice for us, this means that no individual has any financial stake in the company. Directors can't withdraw dividends, and we technically make a surplus rather than a profit, which we reinvest into areas that speak to our mission at the end of the year. Our governance structure then is a workers' cooperative, which means that the organisation is democratically run and owned by its workers, by us. And for us, that looks like a flat hierarchy, an equal pay structure, and operating on a one member, one vote system when we make decisions about things that will impact the company, like HR, operations, finance, and strategic direction. We are also an RIBA chartered practice, and we have an in-house passive house designer, technical advisors for community-led housing, researchers, as well as architects and designers. And I'll speak more to how we operate later. So when we talk about cooperatives, we often hear about the Rochdale pioneers, who were a trailblazing group taking control of their own economic situation by collectivising their buying power to improve their access to resources. But there is an equally, if not more radical tradition that goes back just as far to the Underground Railway Road and the civil rights movement in America. Dr. Gordon Lindbergh is someone who has written extensively on this area and captures it beautifully in the quote you can see on the screen here, which I'll read to you. Cooperatives are an underrepresented resource and economic strategy. They are often denigrated because they are misunderstood or because they are unfairly assumed to be too radical, too small scale, and too precarious. But cooperatives solve economic problems in different ways than conventional for-profit businesses. They operate on the values and principles of democratic participation, inclusion, solidarity, sharing, and for need rather than for profit. Cooperative businesses stabilise communities because they are community-based business anchors, and they distribute, recycle, and multiply local expertise and capital within a community. This just captures that quite beautifully there. The Rochdale pioneers are credited for the 7 cooperative principles, which are still the basis of the cooperative movement today, and to which we have signed up to as a registered member of Co-ops UK. You can see these principles on the screen now. We've got voluntary open membership, democratic member control, cooperation amongst other cooperatives, autonomy and independence, member economic participation, concern for the community, and education, training and information. And to us, cooperative values are at the heart of our radical practice. If we wish to democratise the way our cities and buildings are designed and built, and the way they are owned and governed, we must democratise our own organisations and practice, we feel. The testing and applying of theory through an iterative action learning process is a core part of how TBD practices. The approach remains still quite fringe and often sits on the edge of mainstream practices and the industry as a whole, but we're seeing it growing rapidly and fast becoming a crucial part of tackling some of society's greatest challenges at their root in a radical but practical way. I should say that being a workers' co-op is just one way to the cooperative model. There's other ways. For example, some organisations are co-ops in their legal entity, like your business might be a limited company, a partnership, or for us, a KIC. And there's also other cooperative architecture practice out there, which is great to see, like Cullinan Studio in London and Collective Architecture in Glasgow. So before I get stuck into our projects, I'll take you further behind the scenes of the co-op and set the scene more for how we operate. So everyone on the payroll is an employee of the company, and we've got named directors on Companies House that are voted in at our AGM each year, our annual general meeting. And what's most critical is that the co-op is governed by its members, and you can become a member after a year of working with us. If you do choose to become a member, you tend to take on something extra outside of your core job role to help with the running of the co-op. So for me, as well as being an architect and doing the roles and tasks that are associated with that, I'm also head of finance for us, which means I'm accountable for making sure that all things financial happen as they should and when they should, and keeping on top of this. The co-op provides training to support its members to take on these areas, which is much appreciated. And we're definitely getting better at outsourcing some of the things that are part of running the business too. Most importantly, as a member, you gain a vote, a weighted vote, which is usually exercised at weekly meetings where a proposal might have been brought forward that requires approval. For example, in the past, we voted for everyone to have a pay rise. And as a young practice in a period of growth, these proposals often feed into our wider co-op policy, which we capture in our handbook, which means that next time, if we wanted to vote a pay rise again, we can see that the 5 things on the checklist have been satisfied rather than starting from scratch. When we vote, we use a process called consensus-based decision-making to make these decisions, and apps like Notion and Slack help us to keep our communication on policy and our structure as transparent as possible to all employees, not just the members who are involved. Most recently, we came together to co-create a temporary COVID governance policy in light of the pandemic to support us in working well and happily together still, but while we were remote. It's helped us to keep on top of risks. We have a wellbeing policy, and we put some decision-making triggers in place to check in on, to update the policy as we needed to. I'll talk a bit to our flat hierarchy. So although we operate in that way, we do use a combination of tools to create a soft hierarchy to ensure that the projects and other business areas do actually get done and get done on time and on budget. One of these is a project management framework called ARCHI. You may have heard of it before. ARCHI stands for Accountable, Responsible, Consulted and Informed. And for each project, we have an accountable person with whom ultimate responsibility for its quality, its delivery is held, and other team members may then be responsible for supporting them to deliver the work, much like a project team. Another management tool we use is in HR. We have peer checking in system, and each employee has their own peer manager with whom they check in with each month, maybe every 6 weeks, to see how their well-being is, talk through any concerns they might have, any successes that they've had, and to support them in implementing goals, either with an external coach or directly with their peer. We have quite a flexible way of working. Most people work part-time, sometimes remotely. So we do our best to support each other in managing our own time and being good communicators. And again, we use apps and training to help us to do this well. And it's been such a huge benefit to us having these systems in place already when we were forced to move quickly into remote working for everyone during lockdown. So that was just great to have those in place to be able to make that transition as smooth as possible with everything going crazy in the world. And for new people that join us, for new employees, typically joining a practice, you might get sent off to upskill in Revit, for example, and go on a course for that. And for us, getting to know our studio culture is just as important. So we've created a handbook and crafted an onboarding process to support those joining us so they can get up to speed and work us out and work out their role in the co-op to give a soft landing as they join. Although saying that, we use ArchiCAD, and that would have been great to have a course on how to use that. Don't know if anyone else uses it, but it's one to definitely one that's got lots of learning in. So we are concerned not only with what we do, but how we do it. And being a cooperative and democratizing our practice really matters to us. It feeds into our approach to design, which is focused on designing homes, neighbourhoods and cities for an ecologically sustainable and convivial future, which we do through participatory city making. And you can see a selection of our projects here on the screen. We specialise in ecological architecture, community engagement, citizen-led and participatory design, action research and community-led housing. As Thomas said, we do lots of things, but underpinned by our principles and our values. And I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of a few of these projects now. So first up is our project in Tame, Oxfordshire, where we're working with the local community land trust to design truly affordable housing with the people who will live there. We've worked closely with the client group for the last couple of years to establish their brief and their vision for the site through workshops and other exercises as their technical advisors. And now we're their architects taking the project forward to secure planning for 31 homes on a rural exception site just on the edge of the town centre. So next we have Beckett Street. And earlier this year, the government magically and arguably ended homelessness overnight, moving rough sleepers into hostels and hotels as part of their pandemic response. However, these stays started to come to an end over the summer, and as they did, we partnered with local organisations in Oxford to bring some empty buildings back into meanwhile use, so with a short-term lease for those leaving the hotels and looking to move on through the homelessness pathway. It's been tricky navigating the planning system to gain that temporary change of use. It's something that is, meanwhile use is blossoming in Oxford, but still feels fairly new sometimes. And we've also been working closely with the new residents using participatory design methodologies to design their new home with them rather than to them. And Manor Farm is one of our completed projects a couple of years ago now. We follow a fabric first approach to all of our architecture using Passive House modelling software, PHPP, from early concept design throughout the project to make sure that we're designing ecological buildings that are also beautiful. And so here's some photos of a completed ecological extension to a listed home just on the edge of Oxford. So our income is made up of privately paid for and grant funded projects, which supports our financial resilience. And that's made possible through our business model. Homemaker Oxford is our 3-year grant funded action research project on housing and homelessness. Driven by the dual issues of a rise in homelessness and the prevalence of empty and underused space in Oxford, we set out to explore how such spaces might be put to good use, providing housing for people without a home. Homemaker focuses on the complex and stubborn gap created by a lack of social housing, expensive rents, and the rising number of people who are homeless. And we're using design research and rapid prototyping alongside our knowledge of community-led housing to populate this gap with truly affordable, locally rooted and well-designed homes. But also alongside this, Homemaker is developing the innovative new business models and partnerships needed to develop these homes and support their residents in the process. Through a methodology of co-production and our ethic of participatory urban practice, we're really hoping to shift the narratives on housing and homelessness in the city and to challenge how Oxford as a city delivers housing for low-income citizens. Our open house project is an example of us in the journey to doing this. We opened up a public talking shop on housing and homelessness for a year last year. There was nothing to buy, just stories to share and conversations to be had around housing and homelessness. And everyone was welcome, whether you had a second home in North Oxford or you'd spent the night on the streets the night before. So our action research informs our architecture, and our architecture informs our research. And the relationships and partnerships we've fostered through this project Homemaker has grown into perhaps more traditional architectural work, but with a homemaker spin, which we're calling for the moment the Homemaker approach. And I suppose that sits as a service now for our clients. It embodies much of what I've said about our Homemaker research, embodying co-production methodologies. And here are a couple of projects that speak to that. So for example, Oxford City Council commissioned us in collaboration with another local practice, Jessup and Cook Architects, to design Floyd's Row, a new assessment centre and rough sleeper hub. TBD included the voice of the experts in the design process from the beginning, speaking to those with a lived experience of homelessness. They're our experts, and developed a set of design principles to guide the project going forwards. That was that sort of work stage 1 to work stage 2 to help guide it going forwards, especially as we weren't going to be taking the project all the way through. We've recently partnered with Aspire Oxford on the Beckett Street project I mentioned previously, to bring 5 empty Victorian townhouses forward to support those leaving the hotel stays, as I've said, but also for the city's first COVID secure winter provision. It's a term that's going to be moving around different cities over this winter, I'm sure. But we've involved the residents in the design process of these, bringing these buildings back into use. And we also ran How to Build a House class last year in partnership with charity Crisis, teaching their members a mix of practical skills and theory on housing, it was just a great experience to draw and to make with them. Collaboration is a big part of being cooperative, and we often collaborate with partners, local partners, to bring projects to fruition. Embrace the mess of practice. Architectural practice is messy at the best of times, and the additional layers that we're adding to it just makes it all the messier. We know that we have a 360-degree way of working, and we often come at things sideways, but we've got a clear set of principles to guide us forward. We really love working through this mess together and collaborating to find creative paths to neat solutions. So if anyone is interested in finding out more about co-ops or collaborating, please ask any questions, or we're always happy to talk, myself and my colleagues, so definitely get in touch.
Thank you, Katie. That again, really inspiring talk. I think what really strikes me about both kind of Catherine and Katie's talk is how these innovative models seem to then lead to kind of innovative projects. I'm not sure if you'd agree, Katie, or kind of like, or what your experience of that is. Do you think it's because of your innovative model that you get involved in some of these? I mean, you talked a little bit about the kind of being part of a larger ecology as well through the cooperative model. I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think lots of our clients don't know us for being a cooperative, I would say, but by being a cooperative, that really helps us in our approach that we take to projects and building those partnerships with people across the city, as I've said. That helps us to work on these projects and hopefully contribute and encourage our clients to think in a way perhaps they wouldn't have thought before.
Yeah, really interesting. I think we also had, is it Armin, who was perhaps wanting to ask a question? Antonio, I'm not sure if you could bring him in. I'll just wait a kind of couple of seconds to see if that comes online. And Armin, feel free to just ask your question now.
I think if I understand correctly, Antonio will basically send him a message that he can now unmute himself.
Okay.
So he would have to unmute himself at that point.
So yeah, I mean, if you want to unmute yourself, you might be able to ask a question. If not, I might just carry on. So one of the other things is kind of from the outside, it feels like what you're doing is kind of really radical. And I'm intrigued as to kind of how that feels on the inside of your practice. Does it feel radical, or does it feel everyday and normal?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I was pulling together the presentation, I thought, gosh, I hope people are going to find this interesting, because this is just, what we do every day. But there are things that are different, everyone getting paid the same, regardless of your experience, your age, perhaps. That's something that, colleagues in the profession often find quite radical. For us, it's that radical nature of co-ops is something that is quite important to us. It's part of our culture, and it feeds into kind of, I suppose, the professional outfit that you see on the outside. So we have fun with it and we enjoy working through it.
Yeah, really interesting. I think again we're going to bring everyone back after Russell's talk, I think, and so we'll. But thank you very much, Katie. That's really great. I'm presuming.